Let's subitize all the way to 4. Here's how. Welcome to video 3 in my Smiling Dog Math series that's designed to help you help little kids understand math. In this video, we're going to help a child subitize up to 4. This is a key step before learning to count. Hi, I'm Dr. Marty Epstein. I have a PhD in math education where I focused on learning everything I could about how little kids first learn math and what can go wrong. This video, video 3, assumes that a child can already subitize simple groups of 1, 2, and 3 in the context of other groups, like on this page, as well as to accurately subitize groups of 1, 2, and 3 out of order and in isolation. So they can recognize this as a group of 3, and this as a group of 1, and this as a group of 2. So if a child can do all that, which is a huge accomplishment, why aren't we done helping a child understand and subitize groups of 1, 2, and 3? Well, to answer that, let's talk for a moment about my cute little rescue terrier, Eddie. Specifically, let's talk about what has to happen for a child to come to understand that dogs, like Eddie, are something we call dogs. It probably starts by a child noticing a connection between an animal that's called a dog and what else the child notices about the animal being referred to as a dog. So if a dog like this, like my little rescue terrier Eddie, is the only dog a child knows about, what might a child think a dog is? Well, perhaps they'll conclude that a dog is a small animal that walks on 4 legs, has a brown and black silky coat, and kind of makes yapping sounds. And that would be totally reasonable based on the input that child has about dogs. But with that view, would a child probably think Huskies and Bernese Mountain Dogs are dogs? I'm guessing probably not, because if to that child the criteria for being a dog is that it's a small animal that walks on 4 legs, has a brown and black silky coat, and yaps, well, that doesn't describe a Husky or a Bernese Mountain Dog very well at all. The bottom line is, it takes lots of input involving lots of variation that allows a child to notice differences and similarities before a child can come to understand the concept of a dog, what a dog is and what a dog is not. The same holds true for understanding the idea of using numbers like 1, 2, and 3 to quantify groups. A full understanding doesn't happen all at once. We need to build it. And how we start to build it isn't the same as how we continue to build it and how we refine it. Hopefully, by starting with groups made up of identical items that were all the same color, all the same size, that were all evenly spaced apart, that were all perfectly lined up, we made it pretty easy for a child to differentiate between and subitize groups of 1, 2, and 3. And that was a great place to start. But if that's all a child has been exposed to, that child is likely to have a very narrow and not yet fully formed understanding of the concept of a group and using numbers like 1, 2, and 3 to quantify groups. And we need to stretch their understanding because based on the inputs we've given them so far, a child could easily make some narrow early assumptions, like that we can only use numbers such as 1, 2, or 3 to tell a group's size if all the items in the group are identical types of items that are all the same color, that are all the same size, that are all evenly spaced, that are all perfectly lined up horizontally. Yikes! That's neither useful nor accurate. We don't want a child to think that. So we have some important stretching to do. So let's get started stretching the idea of groups and using numbers to quantify groups. For example, we need to help a child realize that these are all groups with 1 apple in them. For there to be 1 apple in a group, it doesn't matter if the apple is tiny, small, medium, or huge. All that matters is how many apples are in the group and that there was only 1 apple in the group. To comprise a group of 2 apples along the same vein, the apples can be the same size, but they don't have to be. They can be very different sizes. And the same holds true for groups of 3. In a group of 3 apples, the apples can all be the same size or they can be very different sizes. These are all groups of 3 apples. We also need to provide a child with input like this to help them understand that items in a group can be oriented, tipped, or positioned in any way. These are all groups with one apple in them. And all of these groups are groups of 2 apples, because 2 describes how many apples are in the group regardless of the characteristics or position of any individual apple in the group. And for the same reasons, these are all groups of 3 apples. We also need to provide a child with input that allows them to understand that items in a group can be any color or any combinations of colors, patterns, or texture. For example, these are all groups with 1 apple in them. And these are all groups of 2 apples. And these are all groups of 3 apples. And we also need to provide input to allow a child to understand that items in a group don't have to be identical. For example, these are all groups of 3 stars. And these are all groups of 3 dogs. We can even define groups very, very broadly and simply make groups of things, like the groups of 3 things on this page. And groups can be made up of non-physical things like claps, winks, notes sung, la la la, or times at bat. So lots of relevant variation is needed to help a child understand how flexible the idea of a group is that can be quantified with a number. For example, this is a group with 1 star. So is this, and this, and this, but not this. This group of stars doesn't have 1 star. This group of stars has 2 stars in it. And so does this group of stars, and this group of stars, and this group of stars. But not this group. This group of stars doesn't have 2 stars in it. This group of stars has 3 stars in it. And so does this group of stars, and this group of stars, and this group of stars. The idea of a group of 3 stars stretches to include all of these collections of very different types of stars that are arranged in very different ways. So I want to take a moment to share with you why I focus on stretching a child's understanding of using numbers to quantify groups of 1, 2, and 3 before working on subitizing groups of 4. At least for me, I can quickly subitize a group of 4, but only if I see 4 is made up of the smaller subgroups of 1 and 3 or 2 and 2 that I can instantly subitize. Something like this. Like here, I find it easier to subitize 4 if I can instantly build up 4 from the smaller groups of 1 and 3 or 2 and 2 that I can immediately subitize. I find this harder because I have to first do the work of finding and mentally separating subgroups of 1 and 3 or 2 and 2 from each other accurately. But since they're all in a line and all the same color, that's a bit challenging to do. So it makes sense to use color and the purposeful arrangement of items in a way that allows a child to easily anchor on the smaller subgroups of 1, 2, and 3 that they can already subitize. And use that understanding to help them subitize groups of 4 like this. See how with these groups we've built up 4 from 3 and 1 and 2 and 2. And this approach also has the very, very, very important benefit of helping a child see early on that groups can be viewed as made up of other groups, which is a key idea in mathematics. So for example, this group of stars has 3 stars in it, but this group of stars isn't a group of 3 stars. This is a group of 4 stars. And this group of stars has 3 stars in it, but this group of stars is bigger. It doesn't just have 3 stars in it. This group of stars has 4 stars in it. How many stars are in this group of stars? This group of stars has 3 stars in it, but this group doesn't have just 3 stars in it. This group of stars has 4 stars in it. How many stars here? It's another group with 3 stars. How many stars now? This group now doesn't just have 3 stars in it. This group of stars has 4 stars in it. Now that we have an approach for helping a child subitize groups of 4, let's step back, and summarize the ideas in video 3. It's important to stretch the idea of using numbers to quantify groups. Groups that can be quantified with numbers can be made up of identical or highly dissimilar items, and items can be organized and arranged in pretty much any way. Once a child understands this, we can use different colors and different arrangements of items or some other approach to help them subitize groups of 4 by making it easy for a child to see and subitize the subgroups of 1 and 3 or 2 and 2 that make up that group of 4. A few final thoughts. To make it easier to subitize 4, I'd stretch the idea of using a number to quantify a group definitely far enough that a child recognizes that groups can include different colored items that are arranged in a variety of ways, or stretch it in some other way that allows a child to quickly pick out the group of 3 in a group of 4, or the group of 2 in a group of 4. Beyond that, how far and when you stretch the idea of using a number to quantify a group is a judgment call. But ultimately, you do want to help a child develop a flexible understanding of how numbers are used to quantify groups. This is key to understanding mathematics. For example, we typically start children off using single whole units like one single whole apple to quantify groups, like helping them describe this, as we've been doing in these videos, as a group of 3 apples. And that's a great place to start. But at some point, we need to help a child view this more flexibly, as not just 3 individual apples, but as one group of 3 apples. Isn't that a trivial difference? Well, not really, and here's why. Viewing this as one group of 3 apples sets the stage for understanding that we can use numbers very flexibly, including to describe how many groups of a given size or unit comprise another group. For example, we can view this as 4 groups of 3 apples. In fact, there's lots and lots of ways to answer the question, how many apples are in this group of apples? But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. The reason I'm bringing up this point now is that a rigid, inflexible view of numbers can start early, and if it does, it can be hard to shake. We want to avoid this by providing children with the input they need to develop a strong and flexible understanding of how numbers can be used to quantify groups. If you want help stretching the idea of using numbers to quantify groups, that's one of the things my book, Very Early Math Set 1, is all about. It addresses this issue as well as helping a child subitize groups of 1, 2, and 3. It's available through the links on my Smiling Dog Math website as well as through Amazon. The next video, video 4, is all about using a child's subitizing ability to help them understand how counting works to tell a group size. This is a critical step in a child's math development, and it turns out that not all ways of teaching a child how counting works to tell a group size are equally effective. In fact, some don't work very well at all. Thank you so much for joining me for Smiling Dog Math Video 3. Please share, like, and subscribe so lots of little kids can build a strong math foundation. Bye for now.